It's official. President Hamid Karzai is the first democratically elected leader of Afghanistan. U.S. and Afghan special forces are holding the line against ISIS in eastern Afghanistan.
This is Lieutenant Commander Amy Forsythe in action. The award-winning journalist and military combat veteran served nearly 18 years in the U.S. Marine Corps, shooting behind the camera as a combat correspondent and in front of it. She served multiple deployments to some of the most dangerous parts of the world, including 2 tours in Iraq and 3 in Afghanistan. Her main job was reporting stories from these hotspots and working closely with local journalists. And she had some impressive interview subjects. But Lieutenant Forsythe says some of the most meaningful encounters involved the Afghan people, especially the children, who she bonded with while participating in humanitarian efforts in the villages. Today, Lieutenant Forsythe works at Camp Pendleton as a public affairs officer and is currently serving in the U.S. Navy Reserve. She lives in Fallbrook with her husband and is about to publish a book honoring Camp Pendleton Marines since 9/11. I met up with Lieutenant Forsythe one day after the fall of Afghanistan at the Mount Soledad National Veterans Memorial in La Jolla.
This is your first time at the Mount Soledad Memorial.
It's beautiful, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't been here before, but it's a nice tribute to our San Diego-based veterans. But it's a place of reflection for friends, families, fellow service members to come up here, and the view is amazing.
You must have conflicting emotions about what is happening right now. When you read the news, see the pictures, hear the stories about all those people, and many of them that you knew personally, what goes through your mind?
Like most people, I just could not look away, just watching the images and knowing how hard it must have been to make that decision for the air crew to be on the tarmac and take off, and those desperate people, the Afghans, just knowing their fate, and then the possibility over nearly 16 years of service. I was all in many of those instances. Risked a lot to be there, boots on the ground, helping support women's initiatives, media training with the growing and maturing their media group there in different regions of the country. And so, like myself and other veterans, we had so much at stake. So we just wanted to see an outcome that was responsible, that held the standard of the U.S. And so we're going to look at everything, probably an investigation as to what happened, but we definitely feel for our Afghan friends and partners that we have over there, and we're just watching closely.
You met many dignitaries who traveled across the world where our troops were fighting. President Obama, who was a senator at the time, Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, even Joe Biden, he was VP at the time, but addressing criticism, President Biden said that the buck stops with him and he does not regret pulling U.S. troops out, but that nation building was never part of the plan and no amount of military force could ever have made a difference to stabilize Afghanistan. When you hear that, what do you think? What are your feelings? Do you agree with that?
Well, I've been so lucky to be on the front lines of so many historical events through the years, and as you know, being right there, capturing the imagery and the videos and being able to interview people, just being at the right place at the right time. And so seeing how policy works with what people are saying and our leadership, we have to really understand and respect our leaders and give them our complete 100% support. But I think there will be questions about how the execution was done and how the planning that went into it. It didn't have to happen that way. We needed to get out. I do agree that we needed to bring our engagement there in Afghanistan to an end, like many people do. I think our time had run out and we had done the mission that we were asked to do. It was time to leave, but I think it didn't have to be that way.
You communicate with the families of the fallen, and I just can't imagine what it must be like for the families who've lost a son or a daughter who served. What do you say to them?
Well, it's hard to process, but I think that our service still means a great deal regardless of the outcome. So I try to have encouraged other veterans and family members and parents and friends of those that were lost that don't let the ending score define how you played the game. So we made so many huge gains, little gains, big gains while we were there, and made a real impact. So our goodwill that we had on the ground, with it was one handshake at a time, or one donation, or one engagement at a time, led us to gain that goodwill. And so the ending, how it ended, does not define how each individual served. And for those our fallen brothers and sisters there, we'll never forget their service. Their fate was not in vain. Their death was not in vain.
The humanitarian toll that is starting to unfold, nobody knows how that will end, but 20 years, the gates have opened for women in Afghanistan in terms of working and going to school. There's a real fear that the Taliban will push all of that back. As someone with boots on the ground who looked into the eyes of these women, how does that make you feel?
It definitely weighs on me. I think we made so many gains that in the past 20 years with social media and opening up the country to the possibilities, that the Taliban will govern in some way. I think that if they want to be on the world stage and be a part of the world, they're going to have to make concessions, or else we might find ourselves where we were 20 years ago. But early report says that while they might want to roll back some of those forward advances, I heard this morning that they said they would actually allow women to work in government and some other things. So what we can just wait and see, watch and see, but I'm hoping that there could be so much gains that it would be hard to roll back.
Were the people of Afghanistan surprised to see a female U.S. Navy lieutenant among the troops?
Well, I can tell you on my first tour, which was began in 2002 and 2003, this was the first time that Afghans were seeing Western people for the very first time. So I can tell you that some of the looks that I got were surprise. Maybe blonde hair, woman in uniform, carrying a weapon. They definitely looked like they had seen an alien. So now that we fast forward 20 years from now, they have been seeing women in service there, and Western women, for many years. So I can tell you that my experiences were unique in that those are just some life-enriching experiences, but it opened my eyes to the way other people live their life and in different cultures.
What led you to a military career?
Well, Sandra, I started my career, I was born and raised in Sonoma County, which was in Northern California, and I grew up listening to my grandparents' stories. My grandmother was an Army nurse and my grandfather was a Marine, and they actually met on the island of Guam during World War II. And so I kind of grew up hearing and thinking about service, and that led me to joining the Marines.
And what was it like as you were going through your training as a woman? I mean, there weren't very many women doing this, right?
There weren't, and recruiting was tough. I had to really chase the recruiters down and say, I can do this, I want to serve. And this was in the late 80s, early 90s, sort of post-Vietnam era, where it really wasn't popular to serve. So I had to chase them down and work for it. But I went to boot camp in Parris Island, and was all girls, so we're sort of confined to that. And then once we got to the regular Marine Corps, just integrated and tried to prove my value as a combat correspondent. Was my job as a photographer. And so really took that seriously, learned the craft of photography and videography, and which led me to so many great opportunities after I left active duty and stayed in the reserves as well.
Instead of shooting guns, you were shooting video, you were shooting behind the camera, but you also are trained in shooting weapons.
Yes.
What was it like going through all of that and the physical rigors of, passing all the tests to make it?
Well, I actually found it quite easy. I really enjoyed the physical aspect of the Marine Corps, the boot camp, the obstacle courses, learning how to fire all the weapons, taking apart the weapons, putting them back together. I enjoyed that part. And so in the Marine Corps, you're not just a videographer, you're actually, they emphasize that you are a Marine first, and that means you have to know all of the Marine Corps doctrine and shoot weapons and be proficient with weapons, because you're a rifleman first. And so I loved that part of it, and I took great pride in knowing how to do that.
How are you treated by your male colleagues?
Well, I think in all fairness, not too bad. I think that I had a fairly good experience. My first duty station was on Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and so it was very isolated, and there was only just a handful of females there. But for the most part, I've had great experiences, and I enjoyed that camaraderie when in a good environment, that they accepted me as a partner and an equal member.
And did that translate also on your deployments?
For the most part, I was treated fairly. I think that once we saw the value of having women on deployment, and there was, so the mentality, especially in Iraq, was it's an all hands on deck effort, because we needed every able-bodied person to do their part and then some. And so for the most part, I think that turned the tide in Iraq and Afghanistan, at least in the past 20 years, especially now, is that women are fully integrated and can play a role. And so I think that once women proved that they're willing to kit up, go in the fight, put themselves in harm's way, and some have been killed and injured severely, that really means something to men in the military, that if she is willing to do that, she's on my team. And for example, Megan McClung, a Marine that I served with, was killed in Afghanistan, and that took everyone by surprise, and it really shaped the way people thought about women in service, is that if you're willing to go forward and be a part of the team and take the risk, that's good enough for other people to say, okay, she's willing to risk it all just as much as anyone else. That means something.
While you were in Afghanistan, you spent much of your time mentoring people, young women in various orphanages and that sort of thing. What happens to all of those people?
Well, Sandra, hopefully we're just taking a pause or a reprieve for some of those non-governmental organizations and some other humanitarian agencies, and hopefully the security conditions will improve in the coming months and years, that they can come back in and provide some more aid to those people that need it most. The Red Crescent Society and some others that are doing tremendous work, the UN and others. We pray for them. And I always tell people, for the record, we were never at war with the Afghan people. We supported them, and hopefully the goodwill that we lent to them, whether it was humanitarian aid, bringing boxes of stuffed animals or books to the schools, will have a lasting effect on the children through the years who will become adults. They'll remember that.
Do you have a favorite memory while you were there?
I have so many memories from Afghanistan. It's a majestic place, ancient history there. The culture is fascinating. The food is amazing. The music and the culture, it really just created some life-enriching experiences for me. But I would have to say our trips to the orphanages to deliver humanitarian essentials and some other toys and things that family members through the years have sent me while I was deployed, and we wanted to make sure that those get into the hands of the kids. Veterans.
You've been called a disruptor. Why have you been called a disruptor?
Well, I'm sort of vocal in processes. I love to look at something and maybe have a different solution, or maybe try to find a better way to do things. And so disrupting, if we're doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results, then we need to look at that. And so taking a fresh look at things and maybe adjusting, making adjustments where needed. And so sometimes, as you know, people don't necessarily like that. They are very comfortable doing things that one way. So, but hopefully in a good way, in order to move the needle in many areas, whether it's women in the military or saying, send me, I can do that mission on the front lines. Why not me? I'll go. And so disrupting the normal patterns, I think, is helpful to those coming up behind me.
And those coming up behind you, young women, girls that see you as a role model, what would you say to them, so to young people who are contemplating serving in the military?
Oh, serving in the military is a wonderful way to really get a skill, serve your country, get those benefits that that you're entitled to, but also you get to meet people from all over the country. I've met some of the most fantastic people, and those relationships will stay with me forever. So I would encourage people, if they are looking at a military service, whether it's enlisted or officer, that take that leap of faith and explore the opportunities and go for it, because you'll meet people that will have lasting lifetime relationships with, and that you'll come to appreciate the processes. But we need good people. We need people who are dedicated and who will serve our country. We need good young people to make that their calling, and it really has to be a calling, because it takes all you've got to be 100% committed to that lifestyle.
Lieutenant Forsythe, thanks so much for sharing your story. Since you haven't been here before, shall we do a little tour?
Sure, I'd love to explore.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.